He is the president of the school board in Utica. Also, a former member of the school board is Assemblyman Anthony Brindisi, who is on the line as well right now here. And good morning, Anthony.
Good morning, Bill.
So I wonder. I wanted to ask both you guys the question, and because when Jim Zecca and Tim Trent and their crew came in, I understand it's kind of parallel with maybe what's going on nationally with immigration, but it becomes a real problem here because the message could have been on Monday. We have a problem with funding non-English students in our school districts. There is a problem. The funding, it is not the government, both federal and state, not following through with funding. It's putting a huge stress on schools versus we don't want them here. Immigrants are putting a stress on our schools. Would you agree with that? I'll start with Anthony.
What I would say, Bill, and you know I've been a long-time advocate, and good morning, Chris, of the school district and trying to bring additional funding here to Utica to accommodate a growing population of immigrant refugees. It is no question that when students come to Utica as refugees legally, they're coming through a process through the U.S. State Department where they're here legally. It is, in the short term, challenging on the school district, and it does create increased costs. However, the long-term benefits of having immigrants and refugees in the city of Utica is good. If you look at the statistics that are out there, within a few short months, year, they are working, they are buying homes, they are contributing back to society, they are learning the language. Obviously, there are some populations that are a little more challenging than others, but ultimately, it's good for the region and the city because they are moving into areas of the city that have been left behind and renovating those areas and trying to build up the city. It's also good by growing our population. We are losing for years. We were losing population in the city of Utica because as the factories moved out, people left, jobs left, and the population declined. Whereas now we are gaining population, which is good for our census numbers. It's good for in terms of the type of funding that comes to our area. It's good when we're talking about losing representation in Albany or Washington. It's all built on our census numbers, and by having more population, that leads to higher census and better attention from state capital and the national capital.
Well, I got to tell you, if the population falls below 50,000, that can be a real problem for Utica, right?
It's a big problem.
Yeah.
Look, we could be on. That's the trajectory we were on for many years until the population started growing again because of the refugees that were coming. So, look, we were a city of 120,000 at one point in time. We're half of that now, but we're growing again, and I think that's a good thing for the area.
Chris, your quote in the I guess it was a story in the Post. Also, this West Virginia paper picked it up. Your quote was used by both Jim and Tim Trent on Monday, almost as if you are in alliance with their movement that says that these immigrants are putting this terrible stress on the schools. Where are you on that, and what are your thoughts?
Well, and I said earlier in the hour, when we look at funding, our problem with refugee issues. And I think Anthony just hit the nail, or he basically, Assemblyman, yeah. Thank you. I'm sorry, Anthony. Yeah. Basically,
I have those moments
what the Assemblyman said, and I concur with, is that we have a funding issue. Okay, what makes this area great? And you look at the parts of Utica that refugees have really redeveloped and done great things with. Mm-hmm. The concern is, and I think the concern, and I don't know, I didn't hear them, so I don't know. I think a lot of what's on many people's minds is the illegal aliens, but everybody that comes into the district, because they are vetted, they are here legally, and everybody that comes in the district has been wonderful. It's been wonderful for the district. I don't know. I don't know what they said, and quite frankly, it doesn't apply to me. It was really simple. We need more money, and my rallying cry is going to Albany and going to Washington and finding out how we can fund this better, so we can educate our children better, reduce class size, and ultimately increase graduation rates.
So, Anthony, I'm not a numbers guy by any means. The formula is supposed to be a boosted aid for non-English speaking students. And I believe it's 1.5 versus 1.0 for students who English first language. The problem is because the formula is not being followed, that aid is not being kicked back to a city like Utica. Is that true? And how do we fix that?
There's a couple things that are wrong with the formula. First and foremost, it's using outdated census data to try and capture poverty in the district, any district.
Yeah.
We're using data from the year 2000 to try and determine poverty, which is outdated. The second problem is the formula doesn't adequately account for the number of English language learners districts have within their schools. And then third, the other problem is that it doesn't take into account enough the increased enrollment some districts are having. So those are some of the things that I've been trying to work on over the last few years to change. We're in all honesty, Mr. Zecca and Mr. Trent should be focusing their attention on their federal representatives to try and bring additional aid to the area to help accommodate the school district. You know, the federal government provides 90 days worth of aid for refugees when they come here. After that, that's it. So there's no, and I know that when I was on the school board, and Chris has been helpful with this, we've always asked our federal representatives for additional support to help accommodate the refugees because, again, like I said, in the short term, it does create some additional burden for the school because you have to bring in ELL teachers and things like that. But again, in the long term, there are areas around this country that are trying to bring more immigrants and refugees because they understand the long-term impact is going to be beneficial for their schools, beneficial for their cities. So that's really where they should concentrate their attention. The other point that, and I did hear the broadcast, so I will comment on a couple portions of it. The other point is that they claim the Mohawk Valley Resource Center dumps all the refugees in Utica. That's not necessarily true. The Resource Center has attempted over the years to find other communities for refugees, and quite frankly, other communities have not been welcoming. They have not opened up their arms like the city of Utica has to refugees and immigrants. So it's not for a lack of trying. There has been trying on their part over the years to do that. And the other statistic that they use, which is completely false, but that's neither here nor there, is you look at the poverty rate in West Utica from 1980 to now. They claim it's 40% now as opposed to where it was back in 1980. And they blame that on the refugee population.
That is what they said.
There's no correlation they make no correlation between those poverty numbers and the fact that refugees are in the city of Utica. They're saying since the refugee center started bringing people in 30 years ago, somehow that has increased our poverty. That's not the case. There's many other factors that go into that.
Right.
You can't just say because it was X number in 1980, now it's X number in 2017, that's because refugees. There's no correlation to that. So, there's a lot of things that you can use to try to massage numbers and change facts around, but the facts are, as Trin spoke on your program, if you look at the New York State Comptroller's report on immigration, he plainly lays out how immigrants are working, getting college degrees, learning the language, paying taxes, starting businesses, and it's been beneficial for many upstate areas. And Utica's not alone. Buffalo's in the same way. They've received 10,000 refugees over the years. So it's bringing people back into areas of the cities in upstate New York that have been emptying out for many, many years.
Yeah.
Can I ask? I want to go back to the funding. Bill indicated that there's additional reimbursement for districts who have refugees, but yet you kind of said there was like a cutoff point. It's up to 1 point. Can you explain that more?
No, actually, most of that funding's been slashed. Anthony, correct me in this year's budget if I'm wrong. I know we discussed it.
In this year's budget.
This year's,
I mean, in this year's budget, what the governor has proposed is about $378 million going to foundation aid, which is beneficial. The foundation formula was set up to help high-need districts like Utica. He's proposing funding that at very historically low levels, where every district in our area will be laying people off, not just Utica, if this happens. So that's one issue. The second issue is he proposes eliminating the foundation formula altogether. Now, the foundation formula has not been followed ever since it was created back in 2008 after the CFE case.
So just quickly,
but when you look at what the reduction in foundation aid and what he's trying to do in changing it, there's going to be a surplus of money that's owed to districts. And again, Assemblyman, he plans on wiping that debt out and not pay anyone, correct?
He wants to wipe the debt out. Not
wipe the debt out that would go to the districts, and there's millions dollars.
One of the things they were saying the other day, and this is a tough question, and we're highlighting all the benefits of having refugees in a city, in a community, in a school district. I think one of the things they were getting to is if you weren't hiring English language translators, basically, would you be hiring teachers and art teachers and math teachers and...
It's a tough question, and probably yes in a certain amount. Remember, all the money jumps in. We have one big pie to eat from, and the money goes in there. And the one thing people don't recognize is...
But you could say the same thing, I'm sorry, about smart kids versus kids who don't perform as well. You could say it about kids with disabilities. You could say, are we going to go through these... And the question is, when you bring in these students... While and I guess we don't have numbers on this, I'd be very interested to know... Oftentimes, someone like Trin Trong, who talks about how she didn't watch television when she was a kid. She just studied, and her mother focused on education. You see a lot of these people that come from other countries that put a higher value on education. So ultimately, they perform better in schools than our own students in some cases that were born and bred here.
It's going to depend on where they are from. Some refugees that come here have no form of written language.
Right.
From some of the African
social
nations.
skills.
They have no social skills. So yes, the need level varies between where they are from. And Trin is an anomaly.
No doubt about it.
You know what? She's very intelligent. She's highly focused. Comes from, and again, family has a lot to do with this.
Yeah.
Whether it's refugees or whether they're our student population, we've found and we've seen a tremendous success rate at Martin Luther King School by bringing in the family. And it's almost like if you build it, they will come. We brought families in, and we saw when we can attribute a lot of the success with families. But that being said, there is a reality.
Yeah.
Let's not, what we can sugarcoat it all we want, but yes, they require more services, and yes, it requires more expense. Is it worth it? Is the investment worth it? Absolutely, because our other students will fall into place.
So how do
I would like to have larger classrooms.
Right.
I have to
for all students, whether it's non-English speaking.
And we talked about going to federal. I know Mr. Karen on a couple occasions had gone to Congressman Hanna at the time and said, "Hey, we need some money," and it basically fell on deaf ears at that point because there was no funding.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with Claudia Tenney not too long ago, and we're talking about maybe it's Bruce and I or Superintendent Karam and I can go to Washington and start seeing if there's some money there. We have to shake the money tree. It's there. We just have to be able to get it.
Anthony, you want to comment on any of that?
Yeah, I'll just say in response to Jeff's question, if you had other superintendents on the show and you asked them, would they rather have growing population or declining population? Every one of them would answer they would rather have growing population in their schools. Many schools in the area have declining population, and when you have declining population, you see declining funding. Many schools are collapsing AP programs. They can't provide extracurricular activities because the student population is declining, and that affects your funding. So most schools benefit by having more students, and things have to be changed to accommodate that. But it does bring more funding into the district.
I'm not, and I didn't ask that to take a stance on whether or not I think refugees are good or bad. But
I agree.
But when you have a growing district and the funding still isn't adding up, are you saying it seems like if there weren't refugees, Chris, you'd be teaching 2,000 kids in one classroom. I mean, that's how bad the funding is, right?
It's pretty
well,
bad.
And we're talking about a debt that we're talking about, and Anthony and I think Chris, you can talk about this as well. We're talking about what is owed. The debt to schools, I believe to schools, is $4.3 billion.
Right.
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah, that the governor would just like to wish away by saying we're just going to forgive that.
We're gonna wipe that debt out.
Yeah,
and that's
right.
and that we can't.
Yeah. Meanwhile, he continues to go and try to push other initiatives like free college and all these other things when he's not paying the basics for our schools
or education for prisoners. And I say, well, why don't we educate our students first before we educate prisoners? But we look at from 2014 to now. I mean, last year 300 new students, 15-16 year 325, 14-15 was 392, 13-14 year 414 students. That's over 1,000 students coming in, and again. Most of them are high need.
Anthony, you want to add on this before I let you go?
No, I think Chris laid out the numbers. The funding should be kept up to accommodate districts that have increased population. That's one thing that Albany has to do a better job at. But overall, as I said in the beginning, we've seen many success stories, and we've seen a lot of good come from having these students in our district. And, I'd hate to see that pipeline turned off, because I believe truly in my heart that in the end it's going to provide a better city, a better school district for our region. And these folks are here from heavily war-torn areas. They're coming here through extreme vetting over a 2 to 3 year process. They're here legally, and they're working towards their citizenship. They're working to buy homes and start businesses and do things that are, to assimilate into our society. So
I'll ask you, can we have a conversation that says funding is an issue because we have a high population of non-English speaking students versus we don't want them here? They should be shipped somewhere else. Those are two very different arguments. One, you could have a constructive conversation. The other one is damaging to the community, in my opinion.
Right,
I
and
agree.
we're it seems like there's some who want to twist the two together.
Yeah. Okay, Assemblyman Anthony Brindisi, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
While I let you go, though, if you can stay just for a second.
I'd like to
Chris,
stay a little bit.
Tim Trent, you can stay till the end of the show. You can stay till afterwards. We clean up the studio and stuff. It's a good time. Then the cocktails come out.
Yes.
Tim Trent is actually on now. You want to comment on this, Tim?
Well, I just want to say that I did not say that refugees have created the poverty in the neighborhoods where they live. What I said was that the neighborhoods where the Resource Center for Refugees, the Mohawk Valley Resource Center, is settling refugees, are neighborhoods that already have 40% poverty, and that comes from the United County Planning Department. I can. Anybody who wants to know where that comes from, I can provide that information. But to add 400 to 500 refugees from war-torn areas of the world into those neighborhoods, on top of the 40% of the population that is already living in poverty, does not reduce poverty. It increases poverty in those neighborhoods. And secondly, the refugee kids in our schools are 1 out of every 5 students now is a refugee student. They get English language, English as a second language assistance. They get tutoring. They get interpreters and that kind of thing. And the money for that comes out of the basic educational program, out of the school district budget that otherwise would go to help these kids in these poor neighborhoods, our own Utica-born kids in these poverty neighborhoods.
All right. Well, let's let
education they need to work their way out of poverty.
Let's get Chris's comment on that.
Okay. Well, hi, Tim. Good morning.
Good morning.
Again, and we talked about it. We have almost 2,200, 2,300 ESL students in the district.
Yeah.
Okay, out of 10,000. So the math is there.
You're coming up on a quarter, 25%.
About 25%. I think we've talked about this in the earlier segments of the show. As there comes with a cost, absolutely. What is the answer? The answer is let's go out and get some money, and we've been successful in doing that.
Okay, but and Tim, do you understand where you're saying we don't need these people here?
I didn't know. I'm not saying.
Well,
that.
it was said on Monday. That was specifically. Tim, please let me finish. You're saying that instead of putting these people here or dumping them here, as you have referred, why not have the argument that this can make the community better? But the funding has got to be there. This is an unfunded mandate. And that's what Chris Salatino was talking about. And put the emphasis on why aren't they paying and assisting the city of Utica, both the school district and the municipality, with this?
Fine. If the funding was there, I wouldn't be having this conversation. But the funding is not there. And the reality is that kids born into poverty in the city of Utica, in neighborhoods that have 40% poverty, are being resources that they need to work their way out of poverty are being diverted to these kids coming from elsewhere.
Glass half full, half empty. Respond to that.
Well,
it's about the funding. If you can
It's-
get
it boils down to
the
the
state
funding.
and federal government have to follow through on what they promised.
But if you see, and I don't, there was an OD report not too long ago about the
Yeah.
district and showed how we are now we've gotten everybody just about out of any schools that are in trouble. We've shown a lot of success.
Mm-hmm.
Proctor's graduation rates have really gone well. So a lot of the students that come from poverty areas or live in poverty, some of them reap the benefits of the extra programs that we have, the extra teachers in the classrooms, those extra psychologists that we have, and things like that. So there is a crossover benefit by us
Yeah.
for those particular. I think it affects negatively more of the highly successful, highly producing student,
Right.
Because now we're having more kids in the classroom, and you teach to that mid
the
grade.
struggling kids are not being left behind.
They're-
However, we might be forgetting about those that could advance.
And our students have done well.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at students like Trent at Yale. We've
Yeah.
had them. We have them at the military academies. We have them in all of the
Chris,
major
let's be honest.
schools.
We're putting out English first language students and graduating, not just Proctor, but all over America. We're putting out English first students that do not know the English language when they graduate high school. So if we want to talk about, I mean, there's a problem in itself, and these kids were brought up in English-speaking families.
What I'd
So-
like to see out of all of this is let's all band together. Let's talk to Albany. Let's talk to Washington. That's why I did the Post interview. Is I want people to understand where we are. We are not now the fifth poorest city, district, or area in the state. We're now the third poorest.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want that anymore. I want to see us get the funding we need and watch us grow as a district and as a community. And I think it's going to happen. It's just a matter of getting the funding to do it. Get what we're entitled to.
Yeah.
That's all I'm asking for.
All right, Tim, you satisfied with that?
To a point, but my point is that funding comes somewhere in the future. There are kids born into poverty in Utica today that are being.
What is your solution? Should we just move these kids out of the school district?
I said from the very beginning, and I finished my comments the other day. I want the Mohawk Valley Resource Center for Refugees to resettle refugees across the Mohawk Valley.
Okay. All right. There it is. Chris Salatino, as always. I appreciate it. This is Manaski and I kind of joke about this. I'm going on my 5th year here, and every year at this time we're arguing about the same stinking thing. The argument is the same. The formula issue is the same. It just seems like this is Groundhog Day, and we're playing Sonny and Cher all again at 7 o'clock.
5 seconds. All due respect to Tenny and before that Hannah, but Schumer holds that press conference. He's crying about the Statue of Liberty and you're poor, you're sick, whatever. I think there's an opportunity to go to him and say, look, we have this problem. Why don't you come in and save the day? Because these are the kids. He's up there at the podium crying about these. I feel like there's an opportunity there.
All right. Thank you.
Little shout out this morning to someone
Sure.
at West Point. We have my good friend of mine. He's a Iraqi war vet. He's down there training. Alex, good morning. I know you're listening because you texted me. Thank you and
Cool.
have a great day.
One other thing, your son is working for your company,
Yes.
and actually something that came out of Proctor really benefited him, and that was
Well, it was interesting, and I told Bill a story during the break that Christopher was out in Massachusetts. He's running our Boston office, and he came across some folks that had a fire because we're in the disaster business, and they were Russian, and he had some Russian friends and grew up in it, and was able to say hi and make the introduction and talk to them, and that's what we see here because we have a crossover or a melting pot, and that's great.
you wouldn't get that in a
Not
rural
getting that
district,
anywhere else.
Anywhere else, yeah.
So
Okay.
I say it's our strength.
Chris Salatino, as always, we appreciate it.